green. Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. Ready? This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen. Here we go! Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate. We love to argue. You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go! Go!
And a good Tuesday morning, Birds fans. Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365. You got Mac and Mac, McMullen and McDonald. We've got two good guests coming your way, including the guy we haven't had on in a while, Jeff McLane. I can't tell you the last time he joined us, but Johnny was able to reel him in. So we'll hear from Jeff McLane in hour number 2 and our buddy Damo in hour number 1. Johnny Mac, quick aside, I was on WIP last night. So after I have dinner, I start to write down a couple topics to talk about on the air. And my show sheet at like 7:30 looked like Eagles. And I flipped on the Sixer game at 7 o'clock. No. Did not know we were going to be seeing history, a 70-point performance. And I tweeted out, shoot, I don't even know what time it was, but it was mid-third quarter, somewhere thereabouts. I said, for anyone not watching the Sixer game, you may want to tune in. Joel Embiid might hang a 70 burger tonight. And sure enough, he got exactly 70 points for the new all-time 76er one-game record. He's just stone cold scary. He can't be stopped. He's unstoppable. You got a younger guy, a more athletic guy coming into town, and he just took him out to the woodshed and beat the snot out of him. So, tip of the cap to Joel Embiid before we get Birds 365 underway.
I think he did. What he played, like 36 minutes? He didn't even go into the 40.
Oh, yeah. And didn't play anywhere near 40 minutes. And sure enough, I get tweets afterwards. Yeah, so what? He hasn't gotten out of the second round yet. Don't be a douche. Why do you have to do that on the night where he's putting up a franchise record?
Those people are douches.
There are some in the fan base on all sides.
Can't enjoy, and that, can't enjoy 10-1, the most miserable team. We're going to be talking to Jeff. And it turned out to be right. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Be careful. When you can't enjoy something, be careful. You know, you don't enjoy anything.
Right. I was annoyed last night when I got that. Before the damn game was even over, I got a tweet. Can't get out. Said, wake me when I get to the second round. All right, fine. You had to use the Eagles as a reference to make the point. Thanks, John. You're right. There were some people going, oh, so what? They're 10-1. Who cares? They can't beat up on teams. And they did kind of get that one right. All right, but the repercussions are being felt now after the collapse of 10-1 into the end of the season morass that the Philadelphia Eagles fell into. Our very own Derek Gunn reporting early yesterday, shortly after we got off the air, as a matter of fact. D Gunn, you couldn't do it at like 9:30 instead of.
Hey, come on, D Gunn. We got to get D Gunn on the show, by the way. Remind me of that.
You get your info when you get your info, and apparently got it just after we wrapped up Birds 365. That not only are the Eagles going to need a new defense coordinator, that was pretty well known for the time Matt Patricia took over the play card, that Sean Desai wasn't going to be back this year. But he is going to be joined in the unemployment line by Brian Johnson, the Eagles' offensive play caller. It's not official yet, and I don't even know if it'll be official tomorrow, because you and I talked about this, the debate on whether Johnson should be back. And you said the Eagles are trying to do the right thing by him. Don't want to rain down on his parade while he's out there looking for a head coaching position and getting interviews for it. You're probably right, and I'll give the Eagles at least partial credit for that. Don't kid yourself. Part of it is if he gets a head coaching job, they'll get compensatory draft picks.
Yeah, that factors in as well.
Yeah.
Which is another part of the patience aspect, by the way, because the same would have been true of Sean Desai if you let him grow on the job and he gets, another job down the line. So, yeah, Eagles pulled the plug early, and they're going to pull the plug early. Well, they pulled it really early on Sean Desai, but they're going to plug it early on both of them and unplug it. And yeah, I think it's reactionary, to be kind. And we'll talk about that a lot, but yeah, I mean, I think they have a luxury they're not taking advantage of that a lot of teams don't have, Jody. And that's
what's that?
The fan base is so loyal. Look, they can overcome hiccups. People say, I'm not going to watch. They're going to watch. They're going to turn in. They're not going to have trouble paying tickets, right or wrong. They have a luxury. Some other cities, that's not the case. They got to literally sell things to the fan base. They have to sell. I was talking to a Carolina reporter about Brian Johnson down there, and he said, well, that's a tough sell. That is a tough sell in Carolina. I mean, you can't bring Brian Johnson in. You can't, especially after that collapse. Especially what they've been doing, they need to sell their fan base or they won't sell tickets. They won't sell merchants. That's not the case here. The Eagles have a luxury a lot of other teams don't have. And I think they don't take advantage of it, to be blunt.
Yeah, you and I see this a little differently. I don't call it a luxury because they earned it. They went to the Super Bowl just last year. It isn't like you can suck for a decade and they're still going to fill the house every single year. The Eagles haven't stunk for a decade. They've been a Super Bowl, then they come back down. They make the playoff, then they come. They're up and down, which you'd rather just see continuous success year after year after year. But it isn't like they've been down for years and are trying to dig their way. No, they've been good. So
I don't disagree. Yeah, I don't. You use the word earn. I don't disagree with that. They've earned it, but they have it. That's my point.
And that's why I can't call it a luxury. If you haven't earned it, if you're just a bad team and year after year after year they come out because they're football crazed and that's just what they do, they support the team, then I would use the word luxury to describe it.
All right. Well, take the word luxury off. They still have it.
They're in that position. Yes, you're right about
that. And they don't use it like they could, or at least in my opinion. Look, maybe behind the scenes, these two guys were completely overmatched and didn't deserve. That's possible. That's possible. What were you doing hiring them if that's the case? But nonetheless, I guess it's possible. But whatever term you want to use to describe the situation, they're in the situation. They have that ability to do what they want to do and to be patient. If they want to be patient and do something unpopular at the moment, if it's unpopular in the moment, and they're just as reactionary as everybody else, as all the teams that don't have it, and which I think is a flaw. And I said pretty consistently, when you compare them to other organizations, this is a good organization. I'm not coming off that stance. It's still a good organization when you compare them to everybody else. But they're way too reactionary. They are. And this is not one time, because you can go back to Doug Peterson. It's not that long ago. They are way too reactionary when expectations aren't met. It's just my opinion.
Okay. And yeah, you and I are a little off on this one. I think they showed some pretty good patience, at least they have as of this point, and I don't think it's changing. Keeping Nick Serianni as head coach. Reactionary would have been coming in and firing everybody. Serianni, the coordinators, clear out the coaching staff because of a 6 out of 7 collapse the year after going to a Super Bowl. Then I would have been there with you hand in hand going, man, this team is overreactionary. They can't let it cook a little bit. I'm going to say that I have a problem with neither of the coordinators being fired. even though it
Well,
was
can
just
I say
1 year.
on your Serianni point, yes, you could have obviously fired the coach. I would argue if you're going to force him to fire the coordinators, you should have fired the coach. Then I think it becomes maybe not reactionary. Then I think you're lauding into dumb territory, because now to me you're delaying the inevitable. You have a head coach with no power, with coordinators he doesn't want and he's not comfortable with. You're delaying the inevitable. That's even worse to me. If you want to show the courage of your convictions and say, guess what? These guys had an historic collapse. They didn't show any evidence of being able to turn it around. I'd have more respect than that. I'd still call it reactionary. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm always honest. I would have called it reactionary. But now you're trying to straddle the fence, and you're reactionary on one part and you're just flat out dumb on the other, because now you got Nick Serianni coaching for his job with coaches he doesn't trust or have a relationship. Now, maybe he's allowed to pick the next coordinators. Maybe Nick Serianni is on board with firing everybody, but does anybody believe that? I don't know. I don't believe that.
I don't either. I think the onus came down from above. But yeah, I know I'm straddling a fence here. I'm okay with the straddle. I really am. I think that Serianni might be able to, and we'll find out. We'll find out early, as a matter of fact. One of the questions I got written down here to ask Johnny Mac today is, how hot is the seat at the start of the season? Oh, it's certainly hotter than you want it to be before you've ever played a game. That's just the situation and the circumstance they're in, because that's the decision they made to try and keep him. He's starting off on a pretty damn hot seat. But live up to it, Nick. You know the expectations coming in. You know where you're at. You know what your status is as the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. You got to reestablish yourself. And maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm going to be proven way wrong. I'm okay with going down that road. And here's one of the reasons why. I hope Howie Roseman, Jeff Flory aren't watching right now. Do you have faith, John, if they had fired Serianni, that they would have hired one of the coaches who've already established themselves in the National Football League?
No.
Who were proven winners?
No.
So you're just going to get another guy coming in who's never been here before with no continuity whatsoever, and he's just going to be dictated to anyway. So why not keep the guy who's already here, has already taken you to a Super Bowl, rather than hire some other young offensive coordinator, boy genius, schema, who are just going to take orders from above anyway? Why would you go there rather than just keep Serianni?
Because, and I agree with you completely on that specific subject, because they're not bringing in Bill Belichick. They're not even bringing in Mike Vrabel or somebody like that. They bring in the next Nick Serianni or Doug Peterson, first-time head coach, maybe not even on the radar, maybe not even getting interviews elsewhere. I always say everybody's got the same 5 names they interview. The Eagles might go off that script, but you're going to have another Nick Serianni. So I agree with you there. The problem is there's stages to it. And I joked about it yesterday, the Kubler-Ross model, which is the 5 stages of grief. Well, the Eagles have 5 stages of coaching. And we're now at stage 4, and that's the scapegoating phase. And there's only one stage left, and we all know what that is. That's acceptance, and he's out of here. They have stages. They'd go back to stage 1. There's a little bit. We talked about the difference between Doug Peterson at the end and Nick Serianni at the beginning. You know, Nick, all right, you want Shane Steichen? Have at it. You want Kevin Patullo? Have at it. You want Jason Michael? Have at it. You got to keep Jeff Stoutland. We're going to go out and find Brian Johnson to you and pretend we didn't like him when it's when it looks good for us. And that wasn't a Nick Serianni guy, Brian Johnson. Sean Desai was found by Howie Roseman and had to be approved. Bunch of different coaches. So there's stages to it. And at least you go back to stage 1. Right now we're in stage 4. And that's, as I said, that's the scapegoating phase. And we've seen some of the scapegoats. We're going to see plenty more. It's not only going to be Brian Johnson, it's going to be assistants. They're going to gut the defensive staff. Alex Tanney, who Nick took a very good liking to. I find it hard to believe he's going to be back. There's going to be other offensive coaches, and now you've created this system. You've created this situation where the head coach has to coach for his job with a bunch of guys he doesn't necessarily have a relationship for. Maybe he develops trust. It's not impossible. It all comes down to personnel anyway. Maybe Howie makes a bunch of good decisions in the offseason. They get a bunch of good players and they overcome it. But boy, it doesn't look good. And boy, he looks like a lame duck. And that's another thing. If you're looking for these hot candidates, and maybe that's a good thing, to be honest. If you have options, you're not coming here unless you want a vacation in the Delaware Valley for a year. Because if you have options, you're going to say, I don't want to. I don't want to. You might have kids. You might have a wife. You have all that kind of personal upheaval, and then you're out the next year. So you get the Ron Rivera types, who's a family friend of the Lorries and things like that. It wouldn't surprise me if he's the defensive coordinator and he's the defensive co-head coach. Where else is Ron Rivera going? Nice man. I think he's been a good coach for a very long time. I still think he's a good football man. But we know how this league works. He doesn't have a ton of options. And that's the course of action the Eagles are in. And they put themselves, Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman, put themselves in this box.
Here's where I don't accept the lame duck descriptions. He's got 2 years to run on his contract. Lame duck is a guy with 1 year left on his contract. Is he on a hot seat to start a season? Yeah. And you'd prefer not to have your coach start the season on a hot seat. Lame duck is different for me, and I know we're in a kind of semantical spitting match here, but I do think there's a significant.
Well, whatever you want to call it hot seat. Then, if he's going to be fired after the year, and if I'm a defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, for instance, because he's a bit of a hot name, bunch of people wanted him. I don't know why he bounces around, but nonetheless, he's got options. In theory, would you rather go to Philadelphia in this history or Jacksonville in that history with the Khans? My buddy Tony Khan. God bless you, Tony, but you don't have the history of the Philadelphia Eagles.
I'm going to speak for Mr. Nielsen here to answer your question before you even finish it. Just guessing and speculating here. He did a smart thing, not because he chose Jacksonville over Philadelphia, because he chose the Jaguars' defensive talent over the Eagles' defensive talent. That's part of it, too. And I would hope that anybody who has a choice between two jobs doesn't go, all right, my job stat, I'm 82% secure in Jacksonville for a second year. I'm only 76%. No, if you think you could coach, if you think you're good, if you think you're going to win and get the job done, you're not going to lose your job if you then go get the job done. I like the talent on Jacksonville's defense better than Philadelphia. That's why I would choose Jacksonville.
The Eagles arguably had the worst defense in the NFL at the end of the season. So I'm not going to argue that, but that kind of stuff can change. Again, if Howie has a good offseason, makes a good couple decisions.
But you got to make the decision in the moment. Then you look at both teams' rosters. And
I'm just saying, I'm saying the defensive coordinator with options. I'm not coming here. I'm not coming here because I think the head coach is on a lame duck, on a hot seat, whatever adjective you want to use or descriptor you want to use. I'm not coming here if I have options, because it looks like unless and remember the expectations are part of it as well. And the expectations, they might not be Super Bowl or bust, but they're going to be pretty significant because it's Philadelphia. The expectations are out of whack too. So the likelihood he turns it around. Yeah. If I have options, if I don't, there's only 32 of these jobs. I'll take it. Mm-hmm. But if I have options, I'm probably looking in another direction.
The more interesting conversation we're going to have, and we're in the defensive side because the side was left sent out the door first, is the offense, because that's where you really truly can go. And how long is Nick Serianni going to be in position? Am I going to be the baby thrown out with the bathwater when they fire Serianni at the end of the year? The Eagles have offensive talent, And if you're an offensive order play caller coming in to take over this team, you should have some confidence you can get the job done. Defense and offense are a different conversation for me with where the Eagles are at roster-wise as of right now. He's McMullen. I'm McDonald. We see Paul Dunwich. What, a plain shirt on Paul Dunwich? Are you kidding me? Of course Damo doesn't have a plain shirt on. He's ready to join us next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
It is Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. That's Paul Dunwich, who contributes on JAKIBSports.com with his stat pack. About the Eagles oh, shoot. The Eagles aren't playing this week. I forgot. Just slipped my mind. Damo, I'm going to ask you to make a prediction to start today's show. Wednesday, Nick Serianni and Howie Roseman going to take a podium together and answer questions from guys like John McMullen. They'll have certainly an opening statement, or they'll give their opinion and or information on certain things before they open it up for questions. Is there a chance? What's the percentage chance that they don't even mention Nick Sirianni's job status until they get to the questions? That they just power ahead and we've made coordinate changes and the end of the season wasn't good enough. We know we got to get that. They don't even broach the fact that Sirianni's job was discussed within the inner sanctum.
Now, do we know? I mean, is Howie supposed to be at this press conference?
Yes, Howie and Nick together.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be mentioned until it's asked, but they know it's going to be the first question asked.
Yeah, it is, and we'll see. And Howie will have to answer it for Nick, and then you get to see squirming. There's nothing better than podium squirming, as far as I'm concerned. So when we do hear from Howie Roseman, optimistic, pessimistic, best spin, attempt at humor, what are we going to get out of Howie?
A certain amount of optimism with a certain amount of admissions that they made mistakes that need to be corrected, and that they feel they'll be a contender again next year.
Boy, yeah, that's a tough sell. Well, it's not a tough sell to think they'll be a contender, depending on what you think contender is. They'll certainly be a contender for a playoff spot. Yeah. I don't know if they'll be in a position to be a Super Bowl contender again. We'll have to see how the personnel goes, but I don't know if you heard us talking in the opening segment at all, Damo. I look at this like you're straddling the fence, you're delaying the inevitable. This is a clear indication, unless you're buying that Nick Sirianni's involved with the coaching decisions moving forward, and I'm sure he'll get, he'll be involved in the sense he'll get to talk to the guys, but it seems to me they're going to say, all right, this is your defensive coordinator. And if it's not Jim Bob Cooter or Mike McCoy, that's really what you got to focus on, the offensive line. And if it's not a Serianni guy, Frank Reich would be the most obvious. Don't know where Frank is and what he wants to do. But if it's not a Serianni guy, that's a disaster waiting to happen, isn't it? You got a coach coaching for his job who has no power. Essentially, it's Jason Garrett without Jerry Jones.
Yeah. I don't know, what's going on in Howie and Jeff's mind right now, as far as whether they think this guy is playing for his job, coaching for his job next year, or whether they're going to try to help him with people that they genuinely feel he can relate to and is comfortable with. I mean, let's just say defense, they bring in Ron Rivera. I mean,
Jeffrey's wife's golfing partner.
Exactly. He's the perfect defensive coordinator for them for a lot of reasons, including that he's very good. But does Nick feel he's a threat? Do they care if Nick feels he's a threat? Probably not. I mean, a guy like Ron Rivera has been around a long time. He's not going to be,
Yeah, he's a good dude. He's not going to be stabbing people in the
right. But I've thought about guys like Clint Kubiak.
You're bringing the Kubiak Shanahan offense.
You go. So I don't know. I don't think they. I think they're. I think he's on double secret probation right now, so he doesn't really have a say in what's going to happen here. If they strongly believe in who they want to hire as the offensive and defensive coordinators, he'll say, "Okay, boss."
And by the way, last time the powers that be above the coach dictated the coaching staff, 2 years in, they were in the Super Bowl and won it with Doug Peterson. Because I've heard from John McMullen too many times right here on the show. Doug came in and said, "Coaching staff, yeah, whatever you want, Howie. I'm good. You're giving me the big whistle. That's fine by me. Whatever you want to hand me as far as assistant coaches go." Yeah. And they made it work. So that's what Sirianni's going to be tasked with. He's going to have to make it work with the coaching staff being put together by
different timing, though. Different timing. Like I said, it's like the Kubler-Ross model. Instead of stages of grief, Damo, it's stages of coaching.
Yeah.
Well, the Eagles are at stage 4, which is scapegoating. Now, when Doug got to stage 4, it was over. That's where we are. When Doug was at stage 1, he was like, all right, Jim Schwartz, blah, blah, blah. That's a great co-head coach, great defensive coordinator, and they had some tremendous success. They're not in the same stage here. They're going backwards on Nick Sirianni. They're buttoning him. Yeah.
This is they have to go into all of this. and I'm guessing they're smart enough to realize this. They're going to be taking a step back next year before they can take 2 steps forward. I mean, they know how many people they've got to replace or upgrade, or especially on defense, and the things they need to change. I mean, I don't. No matter what they say on Wednesday about we feel we can be a competitive team next year, and they can be a competitive team, but I mean, there's so much that Howie has to do right during the off season. Can he? I guess he's had before the 2017 Super Bowl, everything he touched that off season turned to gold. So maybe he can do it again. But I mean, boy, there's just a lot of people they need to replace on defense. They've got some key moves they've got to make on offense. And then you're talking about 2 new coordinators. So,
well, that's kind of my thing. Why not fire the coach just because you don't want to pay an extra $7 million? Why show the courage of your convictions? It's a disaster. You're changing both coordinators. You're going to voice new coordinators. Thanks, Jody. I'm using voice now. Just show the courage of your convictions.
Yeah.
Blow them out.
I mean, I think Jeffrey feels the guy deserves another chance. And B, he doesn't want to admit he made a mistake. I mean, a mistake that got them to the Super Bowl last year and the playoffs the last 3 years, but now he's not good enough.
Well, I want to make it clear. I don't agree with him. I think Nick Serianni should be back, but I also think he should have some power if he's back. And it's trending, for me at least, in a negative direction. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. But it certainly seems like they're going in a negative direction to me.
It's going to be really interesting to listen to Nick tomorrow. I mean, I'm assuming since he still has his job, he's admitted, I made a lot of mistakes this year when he's talked to Nick and to Howie and Jeff, and that he's willing to make changes and let them guide him through this. Some areas where maybe Doug was like near the end of his rope. Maybe he's not. He's willing, because I think he's willing to do whatever they tell him he should do right now.
All right, here's where I'm at with the whole power base for Nick Serianni. How much has he really lost? Do we really believe that Sean Desai was purely his hire? That Howie Roseman didn't tee him up on a plate for Nick to say yes about? Howie went out and got him. Howie brought him into the interview process. Did Nick hire him, or did Nick say, all right, Howie, wink, wink, nod, nod, you like this Desai guy? Yeah, he's my dude defensive coordinator. Brian Johnson wasn't a Serianni guy. Howie brought him in and said, what do you think about this guy for quarterback coach? Oh, okay. I guarantee you it was a Howie and Nick decision to elevate him to offensive coordinator. How much power has Serianni really lost? I don't think he ever had the power. Yeah, Kevin Patullo. You want Kevin Patullo to be your offensive consultant, whatever. Yeah, they give him certain hirings just to add to his staff. But the key ones, the coordinators, whatever, I think they've been all Eagle hires, not Serianni hires anyway. So how much has he really lost if he never had it to begin with?
Well, Shane certainly was. I mean, Shane was a Nick guy.
The Desai hire, I mean, it's not a cold call here. Vic Fangio was here all last season, so this was a Vic Fangio hire, if anything. I mean, Vic said, this is the guy you want. He's my young protege. He's gonna, you like my defense. This guy's gonna coach it, and he's, I think he's gonna be a very successful coach. And I mean, Sean Desai, I mean, you go back to Sean McDermott, they fired him for reasons that had nothing to do with his ability, but he went on and became a terrific defensive coordinator and a head coach. So you can't, I'm not going to suggest they made a mistake with Sean Desai. Maybe he just wasn't ready for this situation, whatever. The mistake, the gross mistake was pulling the plug on his play calling and putting Matt Patricia in charge, and Matt Patricia was a Howie guy. I mean, Howie's relationship is why he's on this staff. I don't know, and that's where, whether Matt was forced on him. I would guess he was, but I would think that Nick thought, well, what's the harm? He's just going to be kind of hanging around as an advisor, sort of. And next thing you know,
and then he's called the plays.
Now, offensively, I mean, Brian Johnson's promotion seemed like a no-brainer.
And by the way, I think that was more driven by Jeffrey and Howie not wanting to lose Brian Johnson than Nick. Nick probably would have at least interviewed some different people, at least considered some different people. I think that was put upon him as well. So I think a lot of this, they already have, and by they, I mean Howie and Jeffrey already have their fingerprints. To Jody's point, Shane was completely a Nick Serianni hire.
Yeah.
I don't say that about Jonathan because they were going to hire him anyway, but he was completely fine with Jonathan Gannon. He was a Serianni guy as well. But to me, the biggest problem is they're caught up in the scheme, the Fangio scheme, as you mentioned. They're chasing a scheme. When you're chasing a trend, you're behind. I think they have been behind. And I think that was a big mistake. And that's why they went with, as you mentioned, Sean Desai, because he's a direct Fangio disciple.
Yeah.
The new defensive coordinator, I assume, whether it's Ron Rivera or somebody else, is going to be given autonomy and saying, I don't care what you want to run, Nick. We tried that.
Yeah.
And that all of a sudden is different. And different, I guess, doesn't necessarily have to be bad. But at this stage, after you've won 67% of your games, after you've made the playoffs 3 consecutive times, these are rare things in the NFL, as you know, Damo. You deserve more. You do. And if I'm Nick Serianni and I go home to South Jersey every night and I finally turn off the light, I go, man, these bleeping bleeps. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't.
Here's what I would say to Nick Serianni if that's the case. Do a Doug Peterson. Tell him no. Say no. If either you let me make my coaching.
To be honest, I would have done that because, and people could say, well, you don't want to walk away from $7 million. Well, I just made $21 million. So I have some, in theory, Nick's got a lot of kids, but I think he's still got some money in the bank. And, oh, by the way, somebody else is going to hire this guy right away because other people aren't insane and think 667 and 3 playoff berths aren't accomplishments. Here in Philadelphia, they're considered disappointments because of the expectations. Everywhere else, that's pretty damn good. Guys, it's not like this guy's going to have trouble getting another job. I would have Doug Peterson the Eagles. I would have said, you know what? No, But, that's up to Nick, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, and it has nothing to do with money. I mean, there are only 32 of these jobs in the league, and you better be pretty confident you're going to get another one sometime.
If I'm Nick, I'm very confident I'm getting another. Yeah. May take a year, because of the timing.
See, I'm not. I would think it might take more than a year if he just walked away. I wasn't even sure Doug was going to get another chance. It just, I mean, he did not get a lot of interviews until Jacksonville finally came around and brought him down. And, I mean, it made sense that, I mean, I didn't think it would be as difficult, but you sit out a year. Sometimes people forget you. So, I can't see Nick doing that. I mean, he knows he made mistakes last year.
Oh, sure. I'm not. He's made a ton of mistakes, but I think if you look at the step back and get off the emotion of the collapse, and it was a collapse, it was ugly. Everything about it was ugly. I think I just said, I think he did a terrible job with the defense, a terrible job. And the Patricia decision, I think people that do want Nick fired, that's your bullet point. That's your number one. Forget about the offense. That was such a disastrous decision.
Yeah.
And then you can get to the offense and all the issues and not being able to adjust and all tons of mistakes.
But if we all acknowledge that was the biggest mistake, and we all do, that I think is a big reason why Sirianni's still here. Because who knows they made that decision? Jeffrey and Howie. And we still don't know 100%, but with every passing day, I become more sure in my own mind that was foisted upon him by Howie Roseman and by Jeff Lurie that he had to make Patricia the play caller. If they know they did that to him, And that was the biggest domino that fell all year long. You going to make Serianni pay the price for that?
I tend to agree with you, Jody. I mean, I think the Patricia move was more them than him, which is why I find more as disastrous as that was. My concerns with Nick were the lack of changes he made, the lack of adjustments he made offensively. He's an offensive coach, and he knew teams were going to adjust to his offense last year. And there was a certain amount of arrogance over the success they had the year before that he figured, bring it on. We're ready for it. We can handle anything you throw at us. And they couldn't because they didn't make the adjustments to deal with what defenses did against them.
I think that's a fair critique of the coach.
I agree with that. But from the offensive perspective, and I can't tell you how many times Nick Serianni has phrased it in this framework. This is my offense. As long as I'm here, it's going to be my offense. Whether it's Shane, Brian, Kevin, Mike McCoy, Jim Bob Cooter, Frank Reich, it's going to be Nick Sirianni's offense. If it's not Nick Sirianni's offense completely, how does that not create a disconnect? Not saying it should be, but that's been his belief. And he constantly says, no matter who's calling the plays, this is my offense. If all of a sudden it isn't his offense, as I said, then you have Jason Garrett clapping on the sidelines. What are you doing? You're the game management coach. You're the game management specialist. That's a concern from my perspective, because I don't think it's sustainable when you have that kind of situation with a head coach who doesn't believe, because he believes in himself, whether he should or shouldn't, that's a separate conversation. But he believes in himself, and then you're saying, we're going to scrap your offense and go to insert name.
Well, this is what I know. I mean, he knows he made enough mistakes that no matter who was his offensive coordinator last year, I guarantee you we're going to see a couple noticeable different things. There's going to be a lot more motion. I mean, whether he puts it in or the coordinator he hires puts it in, and they're going to figure out, hey, site adjustments really work against blitzes sometimes. I mean, they're going to have a plan for how to deal with blitzes, and they're going to make sure that Jalen understands it and take it from there. I mean, there are going to be changes regardless of who puts them in, whether it's his offensive coordinator that he hires or him.
Here's where I think keeping Serianni, you can make the argument for doing just that. What changed on the offense this year? Dama, your critique was on point. Shame on Nick. He came in with a little too much bravado about my offense, and my offense got us to the Super Bowl. And when other teams started doing other things against him, he didn't have an answer. There was no plan B. So you're right. Shame on him for that. But it was Isaac Seumalo. The removal of Isaac Seumalo is the reason the line fell apart.
He's a good player, Isaac, by the way.
He's a solid player. How much of a drop-off between Isaac Seumalo and Cam Jerkin? Certainly there was some, but to bring the offense crumbling down like it was, I don't think so. Wide receivers the same, tight end the same, add Swift, subtract Miles Sanders. That's pretty much even as far as I'm concerned. What was the only change on offense? Brian Johnson calling the plays. Otherwise, it was the same offense that went to the Super Bowl the year before. I think the Eagles are hanging their hat on. Yeah, Brian Johnson did a lousy job of calling the plays, despite the fact, and this is where Serianni really actually does have a problem. He proved himself to be a liar this year. So anytime Nick says anything going forward, I'm going to have to scratch my chin and go, all right, is that the truth? Or is he just telling us what we need to hear? Is that the truth? Or he's just telling his bosses what they need to hear? I don't know how much I trust the guy and what he says anymore. He said it was his offense. Maybe he did give Brian Johnson hands off, and he just did a lousy job calling plays, Damo. Is that possible?
Yeah, I guess. I see two things with regard to Brian Johnson. One, if he had to navigate within the construction of this offense, and that's Nick's offense. So, my problem with Brian this year was he and the quarterback, who he's known since he was 4 years old, could not get on the same page. And I just don't understand how that could happen, except that their relationship changed when he went from quarterback's coach, which is kind of like a buddy, an advisor, to an offensive coordinator who's now like, you do this is going to work, you run it. And I don't think Jalen ever believed a lot of that. Certainly as the season went along and things weren't working, he was making changes on his own. Secondly, if Nick had a problem at any point, why didn't he just take over the play calling duties?
I suggested it a couple times during the year that he should go down that road, specifically after he pushed Patricia into the press box.
Yeah.
Well, now be a real man. Step up and take over the play calling.
I mean, Andy Reid did, over the course of his career, has taken the play calling duties and given them back.
Yeah, he'll do it in game. He'll give them a quarter.
And there's been no hard feelings, especially with a young guy.
No.
Why didn't he do that? I don't know. There are so many questions that don't have answers in this whole thing, including like, who do we blame? Whether Howie made him do things, whether Jeff made him do. I mean, we're not going to get answers tomorrow either, because it's going to be, this is a
no, we're not.
This is a collaboration thing. We're both at fault, or we're both to blame.
Your old colleague, Jeff McLane, who is going to be on with us in the second hour, Damo, confirms Derek Gunn's report that Brian Johnson will not be returning, but also says Jim Bob Cooter won't be among the top candidates. So some extra news from Jeff that we'll talk about in a few minutes, but there's another indication of, that's a Nick guy, Jim Bob Cooter. Maybe they're going in a different direction. Now, we've been talking about the coaches, understandably so, but you mentioned the quarterback. The quarterback's a part of this. The quarterback's relationship with Brian Johnson, sometimes I think it was overblown. I mean, you're right. People bring that up. It's not like Brian Johnson was hanging out with Jalen Hurts when he was 4. He met him. You're a high school kid. You're not paying attention to a 4-year-old. You meet him at practice, you tap him on the head, and you move on. His recruiting of Jalen Hurts, he didn't get him either time. He recruited him, but he lost.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think that was overblown, and maybe he's fine with it, but then again, maybe he's not fine with it. Does this open up a whole can of worms with the quarterback who's having the first time in his life he's had a downgrade? People talked about it all the time. He's improved. All of a sudden, you have the first down tick, and now you're messing with his coaches and the guys who are advising him. How does it work with the quarterback? I think everybody's kind of glossing over that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't know. We don't know what Jalen's thinking right now. He certainly last week was fine with Brian coming back. He endorsed him along with Nick. Part of me wonders if Brian's firing, and I made reference earlier to Sean McDermott's leaving. You guys remember how it went. I mean, they just felt that he was under Jim Johnson's shadow at the time. I mean, Jim had passed.
Yeah.
But that he just couldn't handle the pressures. And I'm wondering if they're thinking, this guy is right now, he is the scapegoat of the entire Eagles nation. They're blaming him for everything. Maybe he needs to go somewhere else and get a fresh start, and we need to find a new offensive coordinator. Maybe that's how they look at this, rather than, we need to make a change here because Brian Johnson's not good enough. I don't know. Again, that's a question and an answer we won't get for a while. But, you saw a situation with Sean McDermott when he got fired. I mean, Andy went out and helped him get another job. He called Ron Rivera up and said, hire him as your defensive coordinator. And Ron did, and the rest is history. So I don't know how, I've got to believe this. I can't believe they would just say to, the Jalen would be firm on wanting Brian back, and them saying, sorry, buddy, we don't care how much we're paying you as quarterback. we need to make a change here. So I've got to believe that he's on board to some degree, or feels this is not his fight. Because it's a difficult. You don't want to aggravate Jalen Hurts, no matter how poorly he played this season, because you're paying him $55 million a year.
Yeah.
Agreed, but he also is coming from a down year. He's going to have a lesser season working with Brian Johnson. Don't you dare fire my friend as the offense coordinator. If I were Howie Roseman or Jeff Flory, I'm not being dictated to by a guy who's just had the worst year of his career.
Well, I don't think
that's one where I'm willing to take a stance. If I'm Jeff Flory, I can take whatever damn stance I want. It's my team. Yeah, I'm taking a stance on that one. I'm not going to be dictated to by a quarterback who had his worst year ever.
That's why I don't think that happened. I mean, I really think a part of Jalen, they told Jalen, listen, Jalen knows that there were times when he, a lot of times this year when he didn't agree with the play calling, with what Brian was telling him. So maybe I would have to believe he's accepted that it's better if Brian goes somewhere else. Because you're right. I mean, I don't think he'd draw a line here, but I think they would be reluctant to get rid of him if he expressed strong desire to continue to work for Brian.
You think Brian Johnson gets a coordinator position with another team in the league this year, or you think he's got to go back to quarterback coach?
Good question. Depends on what's open. I would say yes, he gets another job. He may want to go back to college. Who knows? He had a couple of head coaching opportunities before he took the QB job here. Boise State and South Carolina both had him on their short list when they were looking for head coaches. So maybe he's decided, that's where I belong. I don't know. We'll find out.
At P Damo, make sure you follow Damo on X, Twitter, 33rd Football Team. You can read them there as well. WBCB, his show with Paul Jolowitz. You can listen to him there all over the place. Retirement does not agree with Paul Domowitz. You got a lot of stuff, a lot of irons in the fire. This is something nobody brings up, and for good reason. I mean, typically it certainly seems like Howie Roseman is very entrenched in his job after the whole Chip Kelly debacle, but he did it once. Could he do it again? Is Howie Roseman on the clock as well as Nick Serianni?
He is not. Their relationship is more solid than any of Jeffrey's marriages.
Okay. I tried. He did it to Joe. He was once very close with Joe. He put Howie on the other side of the building. You never know.
When that relationship may become threatened is Julian, his son.
Julian,
is getting older and getting wiser. And
Alec Hallaby sits at the
I don't think he's ever going to be considered a football operations guy, but he's a guy that, Jeffrey has always needed someone to bounce things off of, to somebody next to him when it was either Joe at one time or for the last many years, Howie. When Julian fills that role, that's when Howie needs to be a little bit concerned about his job.
Do either of you guys think there was any chance Alec Hallaby was leaving the organization? He was mentioned, and he might have even gotten interviews to talk to other teams about their general manager position.
Yeah, he got a couple of interviews. He got a second interview in Carolina, but they went with Dan Morgan, the ex-great linebacker.
How many people did they have second interviews with? About 14?
No, not with
what have they done other than interview candidates for head coach and general manager the last 2 weeks?
They cut it to like 4 or 5 for GM, and he was one of the 5. But yeah, he's young. He also, like how he came up in a non-traditional fashion, so people hold that against him.
He's an analytics guy.
Yeah. Smart guy, Ivy League. But he's Howie never gave out the assistant GM title before he gave it to Alec and John Ferrari as well. People forget that. So
speaking of dictating terms, I think Howie was told that one. We've speculated on a bunch of Howie dictating terms to Serianni today. Oh, I think that was dictated to Howie. You're going to name an assistant general manager or two, and you're going to do so this offseason. And that's why that happened. All right. Even though I know you haven't had a chance to consult with Alex Alaby for the analytics of the upcoming championship games, what do you like, Damo? Are we looking at the 2-1 seed, San Francisco and Baltimore? Do you give the Chiefs a chance, proving they can win a road playoff game? Is the magic of the Lions going to continue? Who's in the Super Bowl?
I think Harbaugh beats his old mentor. I think Baltimore's in, and I think San Francisco's in, and I think Baltimore wins it all.
All right, so we're looking at a Ravens and 49ers rematch from years ago. Always a pleasure, Damo. Thank you very much for jumping in with us today. Appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Damo.
3013, JAKIBSports.com. Our bud who off. Well, we'll get him on next week. The Hall of Fame conversation has to happen at some point.
Oh, yeah.
I've had a couple of guys.
There's so much to talk about, though. It's
right. There's so much Eagle stuff. We didn't get into it. Who was it? Oh, yesterday when we had our guest talking about Eric Allen. That conversation needs to be had. And Damo's the guy who's going to present him. I've been screaming for 20 years now, Eric Allen is a Hall of Famer. And he is closer to potential induction than ever before. We'll certainly have Damo on again next week and talk about the upcoming debate as to who does or doesn't get in. All right, he's McMullen. I'm McDonald. You got Mac Birds 365. John just told you, Jeff McLane's going to join us coming up in just over 20 minutes from now. He's already doing some reporting today. No Jim Bob Cooter. Oh, I'm cut to the quick that Jim Bob Cooter isn't going to be the
Bob. No Jim Bob. No Jim Bob. No Tommy Reese, by the way, who got a job in Cleveland, the ex-Alabama Notre Dame offensive coordinator, quarterback. He's very close with Nick Serianni. So the signs are pointing to, Frank Reich's a little bit different because I think that would be approved by Jeffrey and Howie. So maybe they can go that direction. But again, I don't know where Frank wants to go as a former head coach. Maybe that's a little bit different, but the small list of obvious Serianni guys, 2 are already off. Mike McCoy is another one, who I believe is Doug's passing game coordinator, quarterbacks coach right now. He's a Nick Serianni guy. Other than that, those 4 guys, and 2 of them are already off the board. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it will be. And it's funny that I look at the sheet today, and I'm 100% positive this is the right number. Show number 686 you and I have done together. Today is show 686. It's funny what you remember. I remember the day you're telling the story about Jim Bob Cooter down at the Eagles. Oh, it's Jim Bob Cooter. What are you talking about? Jody, I'm telling you what happened yesterday at the media session. They just kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody. So, yeah, he's been a Serianni guy for a while, according to Jeff McLane. And we'll get more details on that from Jeff when he joins us coming up just about 20 minutes from now. Doesn't look like Jim Bob Cooter is going to be the offensive coordinator for the Eagles next year. Who will be? McMullen and I will come back and dive more into that next here on Birds 365.
Any professional sports coach will tell you There's no substitution for preparation. At Malamut & Associates, that is a tenet by which we live. We prepare from day one for victory. Anything less is not acceptable.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Johnny Mac and Jody Mac here with Young Birds 365. The day before we get to hear from both Howie Roseman and Nick Serianni. I asked this before the show started today. I haven't given an official time yet. I'd love to be able to tell the people that, hey, listen, if you're scheduling your day at work and you've got some flexibility in it, be available at this time if you want to hear Nick Serianni and Howie Roseman. You don't know yet. You're thinking early afternoon tomorrow?
Yeah. Let me look exactly what the description was. Midday will likely be midday. More specific time coming today, supposedly. So probably noonish. In that range,
12:30, 1 o'clock, somewhere thereabouts. And yeah, I asked this question of Damos. I'll put it to you too. They just come out, and I'm assuming Howie goes first. Would you agree with that? You don't.
No, they'll be up there together.
They'll be up there together, but somebody's got to talk first. What do you think?
Yeah, it'll probably Howie generally, when he does these things, generally gives an opening statement, whereas Nick wouldn't. So Howie generally goes first.
And I think that's exactly the way it goes tomorrow. And I'm just really interested to see the fact that everybody's going to want to ask about Nick. And Howie, I don't know, other than we met with Nick. We realized we didn't get the job done, underachieved. We had some issues. There are going to be changes. But I don't think at any point he will address the fact that Nick Serianni's job did kind of hang in the balance as per what the meeting said and what he was able to do to assure both Howie and Jeff that he could correct the problems that they had. I think they just completely move right past that. And Nick is under contract for 2 more years, and they shouldn't.
Yeah. And by the way, yeah, I don't think anybody looking, I said that pretty good, anybody looking for a press release or a press conference that Nick Serianni is back. No. That's not how you do it. As you mentioned, he's under contract. You just sort of act like it's business as usual and move on to the next thing. Now, Jerry Jones, people point, but Jerry's a little bit different, to say the least. Typically,
by that, coach is on his last year of his contract.
Yeah,
Serianni's got 2 more years,
and he's done that. Jerry's done that a few times with Jason Garrett. He put him on the last year, so he's done it before. Cowboys are a little bit different. So the points of the Cowboys and say, well, the Cowboys did it is not really relevant because they do things a little bit strangely. But Nick's going to get asked the question, and there's going to be a million people there, so it's going to be difficult to get in. But somebody's going to ask the question. If they don't, it's going to be me, and that's are there any demands put on your coaching staff? And we're going to see how he handles it, because I think we all know there has, but it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles shake it. I can say, it was very cognizant. Sources around the league were saying Nick Serianni made the decision to fire Sean Desai. So they're already very cognizant of spinning it in a certain direction. Do you believe that? I not, from the standpoint of Sean Desai, everybody knew he was going to be fired. That's easy. But from the larger picture, does anyone believe he's going to be involved with the new coaches, the new coordinators? I don't know. We'll ask Jeff. That's one of the questions we'll ask Jeff. Superficially, he's going to be involved, obviously, but in any relevant fashion, I don't know.
Yeah, nor do I. And I think, like you said, superficially, he'll be in the meetings.
Yeah.
He'll get a chance to sit with the guy. And then after the meeting is over, he'll go out and Howie and Jeffrey will tell him what they thought, and he'll shake his head yes. That's how I think it's going to go. And oh, by the way, him firing Sean Desai. Did he make the call? Did he probably have to break the news to Sean, which should not have come to a shock at him at all? No. Probably, but it all goes back to who do you think made the decision to strip him of his powers of defensive coordinator? If it was actually Serianni, then he absolutely had to do the firing. If you believe that it came from above and Serianni had his arm at least in part twisted, and that's just him being a good soldier and say, okay, I'll make the call. He shouldn't have had to. If Howie Roseman and Jeff Lloyd decided they need to make an in-season panic-like move of changing defense coordinators, they should have done it. I'm sure they didn't do it, the spin got out that it was Coach Serianni's firing of Sean Desai. Yeah, that's because that's the way the organization wanted to paint it. That's how they wanted to spin it. So I'm not sure that Serianni. We're going to have Joe Santoliquito on later on in the week. And Joe wrote a really in-depth, insightful article on Bleeding Green Nation earlier this week. And one of the things he said, and you'd get a grasp on this because you're around him, I'm not, that Serianni is a coach's coach, that he appreciates those who do the job, not just head coach like himself, but all the guys on his staff and what it takes to put a staff together in the National Football League and the amount of work that goes into it. I buy that. Do you?
Yeah.
Serianni is like the kind of guy that you'd want to work for. If you were a coach under him, that he'd be the kind of coach that you want to work for because he'd go to bat for you.
Yeah, I mean, his dad's a coach. He's a coach family. He's a coach. Yeah, he's a coach's coach. There's no question about that. He's loyal to his guys. So it's got to be difficult. He hasn't been forced to fire one of his guys yet. Ironically, I think I said, if you're a betting man, I would say Alex Tanny's going to be one of the guys who's scapegoated. There's a guy he's taken a liking to. Very similar.
Now let me ask you about this because you got a good grasp on this. Here on Birds 365, you talked up Alex Tanny a lot. Was it your opinion of just what you witnessed in practice?
No, I mean, there's nothing to witness. That was all coming from. There's nothing we can do to evaluate coaches as reporters, especially position coaches. I mean, that's all beyond our scope. We don't get to see meetings. We don't get to see how they interact with the players. We get to talk to them every once in a while. And some guys come across, very well and some less well. But yeah, I mean, during the Halcyon days, which are already gone, they were already thinking, well, Brian's going to get a job, and they're grooming Alex to be the next guy in line. And they're, very, puffing their chest out. How good are we? Shane Steichen's getting jobs. Jonathan Gannon. We have people ready. Brian Johnson's ready. Then we got Alex Tanney, who's a rising superstar, and blah blah. And it was all going to be this seamless transition. And the real world gets in the way. Defensively, it was a little bit different because he's not a defensive guy. So should they have probably stayed with Denard Wilson? Probably, but it probably would have been a little bit better. But you still would have had the personnel issues, and it probably would have been slightly better.
The halcyon days come crumbling down pretty quickly. I like the way you put that. But of the spin that was out there that you guys took, mostly Serianni, the entire organization, anybody you talk to, you gather your information however you gather your information. If Alex Tanney was this rising star, as you just put it, that's as per just Nick Serianni or everybody in the organization?
Pretty much just Nick. Every time Nick would bring up young coaches or be asked about young coaches, Alex would be the first name out of his mouth, and was really impressed with him. And he's barely off the playing field, as a backup quarterback in this league. So there's a leadership aspect to it. And now, the correlations between Press Taylor and Brian Johnson are uncanny when you talk about the organizational perspective, because with Brian, it was everybody. Oh, this guy's great. This guy's so bright. Same thing with Press. This guy's great. This guy's so bright. This is the guy who found the Philly special. All this stuff. And then all of a sudden things go bad. And it's like, all right, he turned into a moron overnight. It's hard to take these people seriously. And that's why I look at Jeffrey and Howie in these situations and go, look, I've said, and we've done how many 687 shows together. I think this is one of the best organizations in the NFL, and I'm not coming off that, but that doesn't mean they're perfect.
Right.
And this is coaching is probably assistant coaching specifically. They're just, they just handle things poorly when they don't meet expectations.
All right, along those lines, I'm going to ask you to either spill and give us the information you got. You can say off the record, or I'm going to ask you to do some pretty healthy speculation. How did it go after the game against Tampa, either on the plane ride home or clean out stuff after the season's over and done with? How'd the conversation with Matt Patricia go? He was on a one-year deal. I know. Everybody knows that the contract was about to expire, and they announced it as Matt Patricia will be seeking other opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, that's easy for them. It's great when the contracts expire.
When the contract is up, it makes everybody's life that much easier. Any conversation? Did he just pack up his things and go? Did he talk to Nick? Did he talk to Howie? How did it go as Matt Patricia was putting that box of things in the back of his car after the Monday night loss to Tampa?
I'm very sure. Matt's been around a long time. I'm very sure he understood the situation, and he was put in a bad situation as well. I think people forget that part of it.
Tough situation, yes.
Yeah. But I think there wasn't much needed to be said. Obviously, as I said, he's been through the ringer and been a coach for a very long time. So he understands how these things work. And he knew, we didn't know, but he knew he had a one-year contract. So I'm pretty sure that Matt knew right away that he wasn't going to be coming back. But I'm sure you say, thanks for your hard work. And man, here's your big binder. There's the door.
No. Wait. You dropped a pencil. Hold on, Matt. Yeah, no, that didn't happen. And one of the NFL insiders, I forget, maybe Rappaport, I'm not looking to poke anybody, but if I could remember exactly, I'd say I'm not afraid to poke anybody. Will be one of the top
that was I think that was Tom, who I like a lot.
Pelissero? You think it was Pelissero?
But Ian was Ian was Sean, and he also put a little. He's going to be in the mix for defensive coordinator jobs as well. Look, for anybody who doesn't know, they're getting these information from agents, coaching agents, and to get the information, you have to play the game, and part of the game is you have to make their client look good. So you got to put and Jimmy Kempski joked that, just give them your Twitter password and let them do it themselves. Because nobody's buying what you're selling. But that's sort of the reality of how that's why they get the information they get. And plus they have a large platform. So understand, because a lot of people say, well, you guys, the local guys, don't break any news. Well, they give the information to the national guys because it has the largest scope. That's why they do it. Sure. That's why they hand them the. Plus, if you're Jeff McLane or somebody like that, we're going to have Jeff on. Jeff's not going to play that game if you have any credibility. And some of us value our credibility.
Cling to that credibility. Yeah. More power to you, boys.
You're not going to he's going to be one of the top candidates. You're not going to play that game. So there's two parts to that, there's a lot of media illiteracy out there in the world today.
And, oh, by the way, if you need me on the record, my credibility is what it is. I think they're 0 for 2. I don't think either Sean Desai is getting an defense coordinator position. But I would speculate that Desai will come closer than Patricia will. I think Matt. The one thing for Matt is if Belichick wants, but I can't even have faith in Belichick giving him a defense coordinator position. He made him the friggin' offensive coordinator before he made him the defense coordinator. And I know Mayo was already in that position, and Mayo got the head coaching job to replace Belichick. So it wasn't necessarily open.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting if it could be what you just said. Mayo was already there, and he was so well regarded by the organization. It's going to be interesting if Bill gets the Atlanta job. I think Matt's going to go there. And it'll be interesting to see what position it will be. But I mean, age is a part of it as well. And Sean's very young, and Matt's longer into his career, and people seem to be trending in the direction of wanting younger coaches. So I think from that perspective, Sean will recover, and he'll probably have to go back to being a position coach or a senior analyst or something like that. And then maybe he gets another shot down the road.
And just one quick note on if Matt Patricia gets a defense coordinator position with the Falcons, because Belichick's the head coach. If I'm Arthur Blank and I'm going to hire Bill Belichick, they went through the process. They talked to a bunch of different guys. It works itself out to Belichick as their guy, and they decide to do it. Do you not ask him, now, wait a minute, didn't you fire this guy as your offensive coordinator? And now you want to bring him in here as your defensive coordinator?
I think he says just what you said. Well, we had Mayo, and I wanted him on the staff. We were trying. He's a football coach. He knows football. I mean, if you're going to hire Bill Belichick, you're going to give him run of the ranch.
You just give him carte blanche, do what you want. Okay, we'll see if that's the way it shakes out. All right, he's McMullen. I'm McDonald. We are hoping to talk to Jeff McLane, Eagles beat writer from the Philadelphia Inquirer. We haven't had Jeff on in over a year. Might be 2, as a matter of fact. But Johnny Mac somehow talked him into joining us here on the show on Birds 365 today. Looking forward to talking to Jeff McLane next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365. McMullen, McDonald, and Jeff McLane joins us. Haven't had Jeff on in a while, and he looks like a guy who, much like McMullen and McDonald, just was out walking a dog. Do we have that right? Is that why you're wearing the hat, McLane?
I wear the hat inside. It's a little chilly in here during the day.
It's cold out, man.
The kids aren't here, so we turn down the temperature.
Oh, yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. Save a few bucks here and there. All right, Jeff. There's so much to unpack. I guess we'll start. You confirmed Derek Gunn's report here that Brian Johnson will be out as offensive coordinator. Also said Jim Bob Cooter was one of the names floated early. It won't be among the top candidates. Your perspective of these coordinator changes as a whole, to me, feels like scapegoating. And I want to get your thought process on it. And Jeffrey and Howie have a history of doing this. And we don't have to go back very far with Doug Peterson, but I don't know. It seems like delaying the inevitable if you're going to start saying, Nick Serianni, you can come back, but in place sort of standards and you have to do this, do that. Your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty evident that something needed to change on the offensive side of the ball. And if you're looking at the three main pieces on that side of the ball, and you've decided that one, the guy who came up with the scheme and is in charge of the team is staying, then there's only two. And then you have a quarterback that has a major contract devoted to him, so he isn't going anywhere. So that leaves basically one guy. And look, from what I understand, if you're looking at it, and I don't think everything will ever always be unpacked, but as we learn here over the next few years, I'm sure we'll find out exactly what happened that led to the offense to go from what it was in 2022 to what it became in 2023. But the play calling was a factor, and I think some of it had to do with the relationship between Brian and Jalen Hurts. I mean, he's probably not in Philadelphia. He probably doesn't get promoted to offensive coordinator unless it's Jalen Hurts. They have had an existing relationship since he was 4 years old. Brian Johnson played for Jalen's father. They know each other well. But Brian also brought a lot of the, zone read, RPR, RPO game to the Eagles offense that accentuated Jalen's abilities. And, those were successful for 2 years, but for some reason that element was not. So you can really point to Brian, in that regard, and when you're looking for reasons why the offense wasn't functioning as well in 2023. But all that being said, yeah, I mean, scapegoat is a word I guess you could use, because again, it is Nick's offense, it's his scheme. It was Nick's job ultimately to come up and be a step ahead of these defensive coordinators that spent all offseason looking at your offense, and you have to be a step ahead. And I spoke to Nick right before the season, a phone call conversation he had on his ride home. It was really more about how Nick was kind of hammering down on his players and becoming a little more disciplined in how he approached them. But there was a quote in there that I went back and listened to for my podcast that kind of like I wasn't thinking about it when I was listening to it, but now it just screams that he didn't take the necessary steps. And he was talking about hammering down more on what the Eagles do well, as opposed to changing much. That really spoke to the problems that we saw on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up before you jump in, Jody. Uncovering the Birds, Jeff's podcast, tremendous. Get it where you get your favorite podcast. Because I listened into that particular interview you're talking about, that phone interview, and there was a little, I don't know if you want to call it arrogance, but there was a little bit of honing down. Look, we're so good at what we do. You just improve that a little bit, other than, teams are going to adjust and we're going to have to adjust back. Is that sort of what you looked at it in hindsight and said, ooh, I better listen to this again?
Yeah. And, it kind of, I've heard people use the word arrogant. I don't think it's like Chip Kelly arrogance, but it was a belief in a scheme that worked very well in 2022.
Yeah.
I mean, they really
maybe you should believe in it. Yeah.
So I kind of get that part. But it's a static offense and there aren't a lot of moving pieces. And I think if you just try and hammer down on that, it just doesn't look much different for defenses. So they can pick up on tendencies a lot easier. And I think that just started being a problem. But I don't want to leave Jalen Hurts out of the equation here too, because again, a lot of what, of course, the big, narrative on Brian Johnson is, he's going to call another screen and it's going to fail. Well, as you know, guys, a lot of this offense is just based strictly, it's a very simple offense in some ways, based upon box counts. And if you're going to see a blitz, some of the answers were in screens. And a lot of that was on Jalen to make those decisions at the line. And a lot of times he just would throw it out to those screens. Now, maybe you can say that those screens should have been part of the built-in answers to whatever play it was. But I think, large reason why, you saw the offense not function as well as it should have had to do with them giving Jalen a little more at the line and him not being as effective doing that as they had hoped.
I'm glad you said that, Jeff, because that's been a tune I've been playing now for the better part of 2 months. What changed about the Eagles offense this year from 2022 to 2023? I think they put too much on Jalen Hurts' plate. And I don't know if it was Nick's decision. I don't know if it was Brian's decision, but they decided, because it was very telltale for me. 2 weeks in a row on his offensive coordinator press conference, when questioned about run-pass ratio, Brian went into defense mode and said, you realize that when we come to the line of scrimmage, there's a built-in run option and a pass option every single play. And it's decided that he's basically pointing at the QB going, don't look at me, look at the quarterback. He's deciding how much we run or how much we pass, which certainly grabbed my attention. Is that a fair after-season critique? They said, well, paying him $250 million, we might as well let him sink or swim here. We'll let him decide what we're going to do on offense. Do you think that's a legit criticism? They gave him too much to do this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess it's understandable. I mean, you just paid this guy this amount of money. You believe in him. Jalen likes to call himself a triple threat quarterback, the third element being his mind. And I think Jalen is the bright guy. And I think that, there are times when he does check the plays and when he does make reads, he's doing it at a high level. That being said, he's only 25 years old.
Yeah.
He's only been, everything came to him very quickly in 2022 to the point where he's an MVP candidate. And, I don't want to compare him to Carson Wentz, but I mean, you can see some similarities in, Carson got so good in his second season, 2017, also an MVP candidate. And the Eagles in turn gave him a lot because he wanted it. And, so there's that delicate balance that the line you have to walk between entrusting your quarterback after you've given him a lot of money but also being like, hey, you're still young. There's still a lot for you to learn. And I don't think the Eagles probably handled that the way they wanted to. But I also think a lot of it falls on Jalen as well. This was someone that, I had, through various reporting over the course of the entire year, had learned that was different a little this year for whatever reason. And I think he allowed it to get to him. He got in his head, and it kind of filtered down to the rest of the team in terms of how the offense functioned and how they behaved, and how, even when they were 10-1, this was a team that just wasn't comfortable with themselves.
You used that phrase, delicate balance. So, let's be honest. In the NFL, it's all about the quarterback, and the Eagles have, by their actions, defined Jalen Hurts as a franchise quarterback, Jeff. So, when you look at a decision to remove an offensive coordinator that the quarterback is very close with, is that a calculated gamble, saying, all right, maybe this is a wake-up call versus are we going to affect the psyche? And I think we all, those of us who've been around Jalen, even though he's very guarded, I don't want to compare him to Carson Wentz either because he's very mentally tough. I think he can handle it. But is it a wake-up call or an attempt at a wake-up call for Jalen Hurts?
Well, I don't know if Jalen's going to bat for Brian. Maybe this is something he wants, but when I was looking, after the season, I'm looking at the offense, and Jalen, there was a report from ESPN that Jalen wasn't happy with the direction of the offense. I'd heard at various points that he was not happy with the way he was being utilized, but he had to look in the mirror at some point. I mean, you have a scheme that's built around your abilities for the most part. That's what changed everything for him in 2021 when they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to, and then they obviously gave play calling to Shane Steichen. But you have basically your preferred offensive coordinator in Brian Johnson. You have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. You have one of the best wide receiver partnerships in the NFL. You have a all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber tight end. You have Devon. So, at some point, Jalen, it's not all on just Nick and the scheme and Brian and the play calling. So the Eagles, I think, I don't know how much Jalen factored into the decision to fire Brian. I just think that they needed to change course, and they need to bring in a new mind, someone to look at this offense and either completely change it and come in with a totally different scheme, which begs the question, why even keeping Nick for that matter, or bringing someone just to kind of, give it a comb over and say, hey, this is what we need to tinker with and tinker not. But also, and I think this is important, is someone that Jalen isn't comfortable with, right? I think when you look, if we're going to compare this to Carson Wentz, he was too comfortable with Press Taylor. A lot of people thought in the building by the end there. And look, in this league, at that position, you need hard coaching. Tom Brady got hard coaching until in New England from Josh McDaniels to the day he left there. Tom Brady. And he wanted it. The best quarterbacks in the NFL want the hard coaching. So Jalen is going to have to get used to it because Brian Johnson was not a hard coach, right? I think that Brian certainly would point out mistakes and this, that, the other thing, but he wasn't hard. And I think you need that even in today's NFL, when the players have more power and you have a quarterback that's getting paid that much money.
And we have heard Serianni say over the years, last couple of years, several times, Jalen likes hard coaching. Okay, but now I question Serianni when he speaks because we know he blatantly lied a couple of times, put the company spin out there. So I don't know whether to believe him or not when he said Jalen really likes hard coaching.
Well, just to interject real quick here. I mean, his father was on him all the time, hard on him, and built him to take hard coaching. And Nick Saban certainly wasn't, he benched the guy in the national championship game. And Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma is no softy. So it's not like Jalen didn't get hard coaching, but I think it all came to him so fast, the success. And look, there's a lot on this kid's shoulder. So I want to look at it from his perspective as well. A lot of pressures that come with that position. And again, he had success. I mean, he knows, how maybe he can best be utilized. But I think you always need that bad cop in the building. And I think maybe Nick was the bad cop, the Brian's good cop, but Nick's got the whole entire team he's got to worry about. I don't know how much he was able to kind of play that role.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jody.
I was going to say on the defensive side of the ball, different conversation than offense, because we know Nick continued to tell us all year, it's my offense. Yeah, Brian just calling it, but it's my offense. So that would be very telltale as to who they hired there. On the defensive side, do you think they just hire a guy rather than hiring a scheme? Now, the guy will come attached to a scheme. We'll know full well what type of defense he usually tries to run. But do you think the Eagles, after being as dedicated to Fangio as they've been the last several years, can just walk away from that and go, all right, we're going to hire a guy, and what he brings in as a scheme, that's what's going to become the Philadelphia Eagle defense?
Yeah. I'm of the opinion that, hire the guy, not the scheme. And they became, we've seen when they've hired defensive coaches over the last defensive coordinators over the last how many years, it's been about the scheme. Chip Kelly brought in his scheme that he wanted from college, and Doug Peterson. Well, I don't know if it was much Doug as it was Howie and Jeffrey brought in the Jim Schwartz because they wanted to get back to the aggressive type of front. And then it was Nick Serianni, and I think they also wanted the en vogue Victor scheme when they hired Jonathan Gannon, take away explosive plays, let teams run on you. And then, of course, they wanted Fangio when Gannon left, but Fangio had already committed to the Dolphins. So they basically, they had, Greg Schumann was basically the coordinator that they wanted when they went through the rounds of interviews last offseason, but he stayed at Georgia. So they went to Fangio, and he was like, all right, if you can't get me, the next best guy I think is Sean Desai. They hired Sean Desai based not exclusively off that, but certainly that played a role, his endorsement. But now, I think the first two names out there are Ron Rivera from the Jim Johnson school, right? And Mike Caldwell, again, played under Jim Johnson, plays, a little more of that type of scheme. I'd be surprised if either of those two guys ends up being the defensive coordinator, though.
Really?
Yeah, why not Schumann, Jeff? I brought that up yesterday. I'm like, you think about you have to rebuild this defense, and the two pieces here, to me, the logical foundational pieces are Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis up front. And Schumann knows them, and they liked him before, and that doesn't even add in. You're not going to give up on Nakobe Dean just yet. You're not going to give up on Nolan Smith. I thought Kaylee Ringo showed some nice signs, potential signs for the future. I mean, they're loaded with Georgia guys. Why not try to convince him again?
He's good. I mean, he's good, clearly, but I would be wary of hiring a guy because of players. Again, we're just talking about hiring Brian because of Jalen, and look what happened. I don't think you want to make those.
But they liked him though. But they liked him. So it just happens to correlate.
Yeah, but geez, I mean, that's kind of the risk of hiring so many guys from one program. I guess maybe I would be careful about doing that. I think these guys all need to be made uncomfortable. And at that defensive coordinator position, scheme, intelligence, that's all very important. But you need someone also as well to have a certain type of mentality at that. And you have to be authoritative if you're going to be given complete autonomy over that unit. And the two guys we saw who do that and did it the best in Philadelphia over the last, several decades were Jim Johnson and Jim Schwartz, in my opinion. I know there's some people in here who didn't like Jim, and there were times where Jim had some bad games, but I think all, Jim Schwartz is a very competent, very smart defensive coordinator. So to me, I just feel like you need to bring in someone that has that type of command of the room. Sean Desai, smart guy, hard worker. But one of the things I had heard from players was like they just didn't think that he carried himself with a certain type of confidence.
Yeah.
And that, again,
because
Jim in how the
I always joked about Jim, Jeff. He stepped into the building day one like he was a head coach, and that was a problem in 2016. You know, there were some reports of, and he had been a head coach, and he had this presence about him. And even Gannon has this presence about him. You know, former defensive back in college, he had this presence about him. I didn't get that feeling with Sean Desai, but you could tell he's a really bright guy, really smart. He's got educational background. He's a good teacher, but if the players don't buy into it, it's difficult. Did you get that feel with Sean Desai, at least a little bit?
Yeah, I think that was part of it as well. But in his defense, I mean, you know, they were 10-3 when he got demoted.
Yeah, they were thinking about it before then, which is the crazy part. Yeah,
he started to take third down away from him at the bye. And, you know, that just kind of reeks of hubris, if you ask me. I just felt like, you know, and then you had the gauntlet coming up, and he won the first 2 games. Didn't look so great doing so against the Bills. But, you know, they got, you know, I just felt like at that time it reeked of panic. Everybody felt it. The players didn't buy in when Patricia jumped in. Patricia was not the answer. This is a guy that just hasn't shown that he's been successful when not under the, you know, Bill Belichick's defense, right? And then they whatever. We don't have to relive that. I'm sure the people who want to listen to this don't want to relive what happened on the defensive side of the ball down the stretch, because it was among the worst. It was the worst I've seen in Philadelphia, and we had some bad defenses. I lived through the Juan Castillo, Billy Davis years.
Yeah. You had to go there, huh, Jeff? All right. Let's not look back. Let's look forward, because I'm very intrigued here. You said you'd be surprised with either Rivera and or Caldwell. Schumann maybe too close. They've already got so many eggs in the Georgia basket. You want to put another one in there? Where do you think they are going to go? If not those 3 names, and they've all been pretty prominent, who do you think? Who's Jeff McLane's leading candidate to be the next DC here in Philly?
I wish I'm so wrapped up in finding out what's going on with the firings and all that stuff that, like, I don't spend as much time.
You haven't turned the page yet, huh?
It's hard.
Well, offensively, I think like an intriguing name to me would be Kellen Moore. But so, you know, one of the best names out there, still out there. But the question that, you know, Nick's going to have to answer tomorrow from us, but also more importantly, when they're asking the question to themselves is, you know, am I going to take my scheme and keep it? And then we're just going to bring in someone to call plays for that. And they're just going to bring some different elements to have me kind of look at it with a clear eye. Or are we going to bring in someone who's going to bring his scheme, right? And we're going to run his scheme, and I'm just going to kind of help in that respect. That's the question. I mean, I think if he was Jim Bob Cooter, that would suggest that they're going to stick mostly with Nick's scheme.
Yep.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, I don't think Jim Bob Cooter's, and I think, and that tells me that Jeffrey wants someone to come in that comes from a different school of thought, and they're going to come up with maybe elements of Nick's scheme and not maybe elements of what the scheme that this guy, whatever school of thought he comes from. And on the defensive side, yeah, and if they want Fangio or they want, you know, like Brandon Staley's, you know, obviously he failed.
But
he has a good, but as a defensive coordinator, he did a pretty damn good job. You know, like I feel like, and one of the players said this to me just recently, was like, we need some war horses. And what he meant by that was, and I'm go back again to the Jim Johnson type, that you're probably not going to have to worry about leaving to become a head coach, and someone that is authoritative, right, in that position. So like Kellen Moore, if he has success, he's probably going to leave. You're right back to square one. You're going to have to a head coaching job or go through that again. Why not, find somebody maybe on both sides that you're not worried about having to retain if he has success, right? Someone who, who's been through it and maybe just, so I don't know who that is. The problem with that, I think
it's Jim Bob Cooter. Oh no, they can't have him.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's where last one.
Jim Bob was just mid. He was mid when he called plays at the Lions. I don't understand the fascination. I think Jim Bob's, from what I understand, a very intelligent guy. But when he had responsibility for calling plays, he wasn't that successful.
At Jeff_McLane. Make sure you follow Jeff on X, Twitter, Inquirer.com. Read him there. One of the best beat writers in the country. Never mind Philadelphia. Uncovering the Birds, the podcast. Tremendous as well. You can get that wherever you get your favorite podcast. So you did something. You say you don't think it's going to be Jim Bob. I'm with you there. Tommy Reese got a job in Cleveland. That's a Nick Serianni guy. Mike McCoy is a Nick Serianni guy. Frank Reich would be the most notable. I don't know where Frank is in his career. Yeah. If you go a different direction than that and bring in a name like you mentioned, a Kellen Moore, a different idea. At that point, are you just delaying the inevitable with Nick Serianni?
Right.
I mean, yeah.
I was just about to mention that. Like that will also tell you if like Nick, right, hires Kellen Moore, then the questions become, well, how successful they are offensively or whatever, is that the guy who's kind of like there in case it doesn't work and they just want to be able to transition him into being the head coach. Now, Kellen Moore's never been a head coach before, but and if they're having success, then you keep Nick, obviously. But yeah, I mean, you do open that door up. But I think whoever they hire, for the most part, that door is going to be open. I mean, we're look again, new OC, new DC. From what I understand, we're talking about almost remaking the entire defensive side staff, coaching staff. I think there could be a few more on the offensive side as well. So you're talking about 6, 7 new coaches, 8 coaches. I mean, obviously the Eagles weren't going to announce that Nick's coming back because they don't want to they don't want to make his seat any hotter than it needs to be going into the next season. But all the staff changes will say as much that he's definitely certainly now on the hot seat in terms of what happens in 2024. But yeah, I mean, that's these hires are going to say a lot, I think, about where Jeffrey and Howie stand in terms of Nick's future.
All right, Jeff, last one from me. Rampant speculation I need out of you. Does Jason Kelce's fanatical moves on weekends when he's not playing, a.k.a. this past weekend he watched his brother play, and I'm sure he's going to be in Baltimore again this week. Do you read positively or negatively into that he's still considering coming back to the Eagles? Will having as much fun as he's having give him more hope that for the Eagle fans that he's coming back, or less? Hey, this is great. I don't have to worry about working out on Monday. I just can continue to get out and have a good time.
Yeah.
Where do you think Kelce's at?
I think it's Chris Long. Yeah. I think Chris Long quote tweeted that and said, everyone thinks this is retiring Jason Kelce. This is normal Jason Kelce.
It's just normal.
It's more than it's more the younger Kelce that I knew, because I've seen it off outside of the Eagles. I've seen Jason behave that way, and I don't say that in a negative way. He's just the life of the party kind of guy. By what I've talked to Jason about, and what happened in the locker room after the game. He didn't say I'm retiring to the players, but he suggested as much, and it was very emotional. But Jason's always said that. So everyone assumed that, he was telling them that he was going to eventually retire, and the players were even telling me that before the final game of the season. And I wasn't going to report it. I wanted Jason to be the one to announce it. I only confirmed what had been reported. But he didn't want to make a decision being that emotional, and how he's also felt physically. He never wants to make the decision right away. I think the fact that he went that far, and he has always said, under the advice of Howard Mudd and other people, that you'll know, right?
Yeah.
I think Mudd's was like, when in doubt, don't. But the advice of Jeff Stoutland was always like, you'll know. And I've had a number of indications that he knows. That being said, the door's open. I mean, he'll sit back. I think he'll watch, he'll follow Travis's run. I think if he had planned on making an announcement, he definitely didn't want to do it while Travis was still playing. He didn't want to be a distraction. But I think he wants to, do it the way that he had envisioned in his mind, and he deserves absolutely the benefit of doing that himself.
Yeah. Oh, I lied, Jeff. One more, Fletch, because I think retirement is a potential bigger possibility than people realize. Your thoughts on Fletcher Cox?
I think Jordan Davis kind of spilled the beans, and again, I heard the same thing before the end of the season. Was like, I don't think Kelsey and Fletcher are back. And that, I thought Fletcher had his best season in
tremendous
since
season.
2018.
Yeah.
He had a very good season. And after some subpar seasons for him, it seemed like he was just kind of sliding down a slope and just wasn't performing the way he's capable of. Still good. I mean, the guy is just as physically gifted as any defensive lineman the Eagles have ever had, aside from maybe Jerome Brown. I'm talking modern era. So he could still certainly keep playing if he wants to, whether in Philadelphia or somewhere else, but he's got interest outside of football and loves to fish. I could just see him just going away to his boat and never coming back, and just spending his life. But he'll go down obviously as one of the greatest Eagles in franchise history, Hall of Famer. He'll certainly deserve consideration for the Pro Football Hall of Fame when that time comes. But I agree with you. I think this may be the last we see of Fletcher Cox as well.
It was nice, at least for one day, for it to be Mac. We like when we get a triple Mac attack going. Jeff McLane, thank you very much for jumping in with us today. We will be asking for your presence again shortly.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff McLane, Inquirer, here with us on Birds 365. All right, we got to come back. We got to put a bow on the show. But before we do, Birds fans, here's your chance to save up to 40% on your car insurance. You could do so right now with one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Here's what you do. Call managing partner either Jim or Fran and tell them you're a friend of JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
Any professional sports coach will tell you there's no substitution for preparation. At McMullen Associates, that is a tenet by which we live. We prepare from day one for victory. Anything less is not acceptable.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Wrapping up a Mac and Mac attack here on Birds 365. All right, we just about run out of time and didn't mention this for the first hour and 58 minutes of the show. You rooting for the Detroit Lions now because of Zach Ertz, John McMullen? Because of Zach Ertz. Nothing like waiting until the last minute to get involved.
No, good for Zach though. Zach's a good guy. I don't root for anybody, Jody. But I tend to in game. I tend to root for underdogs and potential games when I'm watching them, playoff games. So I tend to go in that direction. But I don't know who's obviously on paper. Kansas City's an underdog, but how could you consider them an underdog with anything?
We're an underdog last week and beat the Bills in Buffalo.
And so the one significant underdog would be Detroit. I guess I'll probably root for them in game, but more because of the fact that, they've been crap for so long, and now they're on the cusp of going to the Super Bowl, which would be quite the story.
Don't think there's any doubt they're the people's choice this weekend. Right. Those who subscribe to the McMullen line of thinking, which I think there are a lot of people, more than half, as a matter of fact, when in doubt, pull for the underdog. Yeah, Detroit is the unquestioned underdog. Out of this particular group, it's Detroit has the underdog status, and we'll see if they play it this week, and we'll see if Zach Ertz jumps in. Like I said, just getting in under the wire. Could get himself a Super Bowl ring if the Lions can win 2 more games in a row. And we'll talk more about the championship game tomorrow because we're leading into Serianni and Howie. Certainly that'll be the main topic of conversation on Thursday after those guys speak. But leading into it, how much does the championship, these championship weekend matter to the Eagles? Does Howie Roseman actually zero in on what other teams are doing successfully, or does he just go, well, we're going to do it the Eagle way? I'm hoping they're paying close attention to what's happening in the championship game. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Good show today, brother. Thank you very much. I'm back tomorrow. You in?
Yeah, let's do it pre-Howie and Nick Serianni, the pregame show, Birds 365.
We will be back tomorrow for show number 687 right here on Birds 365 and 2 and 2.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.